In just 32 seconds, one of British television's most beloved actors would find himself at the center of a verbal massacre that would see his character assassinated live on morning TV. What started as friendly banter about Stephen Graham's latest project descended into a vicious personal attack that left viewers stunned and the acclaimed actor fighting for his professional reputation. The cameras kept rolling as Lorraine Kelly systematically dismantled her guest with calculated cruelty, transforming what should have been a promotional appearance into a career-threatening ordeal. The tension was palpable from the moment Stephen Graham settled into the infamous orange sofa. Fresh from his critically acclaimed performance in Bodies, the Liverpudlian actor had arrived at the ITV studios expecting the usual light-hearted chat that Lorraine Kelly was known for. Instead, he walked into what would become one of the most uncomfortable encounters in British daytime television history. "Stephen, lovely to see you," Lorraine began with her trademark smile. But there was something different in her eyes, a cold calculation that seasoned viewers might have recognized as trouble brewing. The pleasantries lasted exactly 37 seconds before the atmosphere shifted dramatically. "So, Bodies," she continued, leaning forward with predatory interest. "Quite a departure from your usual gangster roles, isn't it? Though I suppose playing a detective investigating corruption isn't that much of a stretch for someone from your background." Graham's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "My background? What do you mean by that, Lorraine?" The smile never left Kelly's face, but her voice took on a sharper edge. "Well, working-class Liverpool. The whole authentic street credibility thing. It's quite convenient for Hollywood, isn't it? Having that genuine rough around the edges quality that money can't buy." The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras. Graham shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected direction of the conversation. "I'm not sure I follow what you're getting at here." "Oh, come on, Stephen," Kelly pressed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You've built your entire career on being the real deal, haven't you? The authentic working-class voice in a sea of drama school darlings. But here's what I find fascinating: you're quite selective about which working-class stories you choose to tell, aren't you?" Graham's jaw tightened perceptibly. Years of media training had prepared him for difficult questions, but nothing had prepared him for this level of personal assault disguised as professional inquiry. "I choose roles based on the quality of the script and the story being told." "Really?" Kelly's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent the last decade glamorizing violence and criminal behavior. This is England. The Irishman. Snatch, quite a body count you've racked up on screen. Tell me, Stephen, do you ever worry about the impact of constantly portraying working-class communities as inherently violent and criminal?" The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Graham's hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening as he processed what was happening. This wasn't journalism. This was character assassination broadcast to millions of morning television viewers. "That's completely unfair," he said, his Scouse accent thickening with emotion. "Those films explore complex social issues and the human condition. They're not glorifying anything, they're showing the reality of—" "The reality?" Kelly interrupted, her voice rising with theatrical outrage. "Or your version of reality. Because I've done my research, Stephen. I've looked into your background. And you know what I found interesting? For someone who claims to represent authentic working-class voices, you've been remarkably quiet about the real issues affecting those communities. When was the last time you used your platform to speak out about poverty, about the lack of opportunities, about the systematic neglect of places like where you grew up?" Graham stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I've been involved in numerous charities and community projects." "Have you?" Kelly's interruption was surgical in its precision. "Because what I see is someone who's very comfortable taking Hollywood money to perpetuate harmful stereotypes about working-class Britain, but remarkably absent when it comes to actually advocating for change. It's almost like you're more interested in maintaining your authentic brand than genuinely helping the communities you claim to represent." The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the crew members had stopped their usual behind-the-scenes activities, transfixed by the verbal evisceration unfolding before them. Graham's voice was tight with controlled anger when he finally responded. "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what I do in my private life, or how I choose to give back to my community. Don't I? Kelly's smile was razor sharp now. Because I think what we're seeing here is the real Stephen Graham. Not the humble, authentic working-class hero you play in interviews, but someone who's actually quite comfortable with his success and quite defensive when challenged about his choices. It's fascinating, really, watching you squirm when someone dares to question the narrative you've so carefully constructed. The words hit Graham like physical blows. His face flushed red as he struggled to maintain composure under the relentless assault. This is ridiculous. I came here to talk about bodies, about the work, not to be subjected to some kind of twisted psychological evaluation. Oh, but this is about the work, Stephen, Kelly purred, clearly savoring every moment of his discomfort. It's about the choices you make, the messages you send, and the responsibility you have as someone with influence. And frankly, I'm not impressed with what I'm seeing. As the first part of this devastating encounter drew to a close, viewers could see Graham's facade beginning to crack. The affable, professional demeanor he'd maintained throughout his career was crumbling under Kelly's systematic attack, and something darker was beginning to emerge. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every twitch of frustration, building toward what would soon become an explosion of epic proportions. What happened next would become the defining moment that transformed an already uncomfortable interview into television infamy. Kelly, sensing blood in the water, decided to go for the kill with a line of questioning so personal and vindictive that it crossed every boundary of professional broadcasting. Graham, pushed beyond his breaking point, was about to show Britain exactly what happens when someone mistakes his politeness for weakness. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter as Kelly leaned back in her chair, the picture of calculated satisfaction. She had Graham exactly where she wanted him, rattled, defensive, and teetering on the edge of losing control completely. What viewers didn't realize was that this was all part of her plan, a carefully orchestrated demolition designed to humiliate one of Britain's most respected actors on live television. You know what really bothers me about you, Stephen? Kelly continued, her voice dropping to a more intimate, almost conspiratorial tone that somehow made her words even more venomous. It's the hypocrisy. You sit there on chat shows, playing the humble everyman, talking about staying grounded and remembering your roots. But the truth is, you've forgotten where you came from the moment Hollywood came calling. Graham's breathing had become visibly shallow, his chest rising and falling as he fought to maintain composure. That's not true. That's not true at all. Isn't it? Kelly's eyes glittered with malicious delight. Because I've been doing this job for decades, Stephen, and I can smell inauthenticity from a mile away. And right now, sitting across from you, all I can smell is someone who sold out everything they once stood for. The accusation hit Graham like a physical blow. His hands clenched into fists on his lap, and for a moment, the cameras caught something primal, flickering behind his eyes, a flash of the street kid from Liverpool who'd learned early that sometimes you had to fight back or get walked all over. You don't know anything about me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You sit in your ivory tower, judging people you've never met, talking about communities you've never lived in. What gives you the right? Kelly's laugh was sharp and cruel. The right? I have the right because I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. Someone has to hold you accountable for the choices you've made, the image you've sold, and the damage you've done. Damage? Graham's voice cracked with incredulity. What damage? I've spent my career trying to tell stories that matter, working with directors who want to explore real issues. Real issues? Kelly interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Like what? How to look tough while collecting a Hollywood paycheck. How to maintain street cred while living in a £1,000,000 house. Come on, Stephen. Let's be honest here. You're not some working-class hero, you're a product, carefully packaged and marketed to make middle-class audiences feel like they're getting something authentic. The studio audience was completely transfixed now, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats as they witnessed the systematic destruction of a man's reputation in real time. The crew members exchanged worried glances, uncertain whether they should intervene or let the carnage continue for the sake of compelling television. Graham stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Right, that's enough. I didn't come here to be insulted by someone who wouldn't know authenticity if it bit her on the arse. Kelly's eyes lit up with triumph. She had him exactly where she wanted him. Angry, off balance, and making the kind of mistake that would dominate headlines for weeks. "Oh, there it is," she said with obvious satisfaction. "There's the real Stephen Graham. Not so polished now, are we? Not so media-trained and professional. You want real?" Graham's voice was rising now. Years of frustration and professional restraint finally beginning to crack. "I'll give you real. You've been sitting behind this desk for years, pretending to care about people while making a fortune off their stories. You want to talk about selling out? Look in the bloody mirror." The words hung in the air like an explosive charge waiting to detonate. Kelly's smile faltered for just a moment, the first crack in her composed facade since the interview began. But she recovered quickly, sensing that Graham was about to give her exactly what she needed to destroy him completely. "Careful, Stephen," she said, her voice soft but loaded with threat. "You're showing your true colors now. Is this how you handle criticism? Is this the temperament of someone who should be representing British actors on the world stage?" Graham's face was flushed red now, his professional mask completely abandoned. "Criticism? This isn't criticism. This is a hit job. You've dragged me onto your show under false pretenses just so you could tear me apart for your own entertainment." "False pretenses?" Kelly's voice rose with mock indignation. "I invited you here to discuss your work, and that's exactly what we're doing. If you can't handle honest questions about your career choices, maybe you shouldn't be in this business." "Honest questions?" Graham laughed bitterly. "You call this honest? You've twisted everything I've ever done, taken it out of context, and used it to paint me as some kind of sellout. That's not journalism, that's character assassination." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants now fully committed to verbal warfare. Kelly, sensing victory within her grasp, prepared to deliver what she hoped would be the killing blow. Graham, meanwhile, was rapidly approaching the point where his famous self-control would snap entirely, leading to consequences that would reverberate far beyond this single interview. Kelly's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction as she prepared her final assault. She had orchestrated this entire confrontation with surgical precision, and now it was time to deliver the coup de grace that would cement her reputation as the host who could break anyone. What she didn't anticipate was that Graham had finally reached the point where he had absolutely nothing left to lose. "You know what I think the real problem is here, Stephen," Kelly said, her voice taking on an almost therapeutic tone that made her words even more insulting. "I think you're angry because someone finally had the courage to call you out on your bullshit. You've spent so long believing your own publicity that you actually think you're this authentic voice of the people." Graham's hands were shaking now, not with fear but with barely controlled rage. "You think you know me? You think this little performance of yours means anything? You're nothing but a morning TV host who gets her kicks from tearing people down. A morning TV host who's just exposed you for what you really are." Kelly shot back, her mask of professionalism finally slipping completely. "A fraud. A fake. Someone who's built their entire career on a lie." That was the moment everything exploded. Graham's voice erupted from somewhere deep in his chest, years of suppressed frustration finally finding release. "A lie? You want to know what a fucking lie is? It's you sitting there, pretending to care about working-class people, while you make millions talking down to them every morning. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in the communities you claim to champion." The studio fell into shocked silence. Kelly's mouth opened slightly, clearly not expecting Graham to fight back with such venom. But Graham wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "You want to talk about selling out?" he continued, his Scouse accent now thick with emotion. "Look at yourself. You've spent decades as a corporate puppet, reading scripts written by executives who've never set foot outside their London offices. At least I choose my roles. At least I work with people who want to tell real stories about real people." Kelly tried to regain control, her voice rising in panic. "Stephen, I think you need to calm down." "Calm down?" Graham laughed bitterly. "You spend 20 minutes trying to destroy my reputation on live television, and you want me to calm down? No, love. We're way past that now." He turned to address the camera directly, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You want to know who I really am? I'm someone who grew up with nothing and worked my arse off to get where I am. I've never forgotten where I came from, and I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. But this woman, he gestured dismissively at Kelly, she's built her entire career on fake sincerity and manufactured controversy. Kelly's composure cracked completely. How dare you? How dare I what? Graham interrupted, his voice now a roar that filled the studio. Tell the truth? Call out your pathetic attempt at ambush journalism? You brought me here under false pretenses, tried to humiliate me for your own ratings, and now you're upset because I'm fighting back? The production team was in chaos behind the cameras, with producers frantically gesturing and trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. But Graham wasn't giving them the chance. You know what the real tragedy is here, he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more threat than his shouting. People trust you. They invite you into their homes every morning, thinking you're their friend. But you're not. You're a predator who feeds on other people's misery and calls it entertainment. Kelly's face had gone pale, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the genuine shock and fear in her eyes. I think we should take a break. No, Graham said firmly, standing to his full height and towering over the seated host. No breaks. No commercial interruptions. You wanted to air this dirty laundry, so let's finish hanging it out. He began walking toward the exit, but paused and turned back to face Kelly one final time. I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between tough journalism and personal vendetta. What you did here today wasn't journalism, it was cowardice. You hid behind your desk and your reputation, thinking you could destroy someone who's actually earned their place in this industry. Kelly made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Stephen, if you walk out of here like this, you're only proving... I'm proving what? Graham's voice was now deadly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than his earlier rage. That I won't sit here and let some has-been morning show host use me for target practice? That I have enough self-respect to walk away from this circus? You're damn right I am. The studio audience sat in stunned silence as Graham unhitched his microphone and placed it carefully on the coffee table between them. The small gesture carried enormous weight, a final, definitive rejection of everything Kelly represented. To anyone watching this, he said, addressing the camera one final time, remember that there are people in this business who actually care about the work, who respect their craft and their audiences. And then there are people like her. He didn't even look at Kelly as he said it. The dismissal more devastating than any insult could have been. As Graham strode toward the studio exit with his head held high, Kelly sat frozen in her chair, the weight of her own actions finally crashing down on her. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of her humiliation as the man she'd tried to destroy walked away victorious. The studio doors closed behind Stephen Graham with a finality that echoed through the silent space. He had entered as a guest and left as a legend, someone who had stood up to the machine and won. Kelly remained seated, staring at the empty chair across from her, finally understanding that she had picked the wrong target and paid the ultimate price. In the end, what was meant to be her moment of triumph had become her most public defeat, broadcast live to millions of viewers who had just witnessed the complete dismantling of her credibility. The hunter had become the hunted, and justice, it seemed, had been served.